This is Naiji Coach, and I'm going to do a filming today on the Mah'zute Misread spectrum. This came up, actually two things kind of converged at once. One is that there's going to be several video episodes done about Naiji who misread as this or that, and we'll get really in depth on that. So it might be helpful to kind of give an overview of just the general phenomenon of Naiji misreading as being different mojos than they are. But then also a multi-part question was asked by Naiji Lira, and I want to get into that. But as often happens when someone asks a nice high-level question like that, and it has levels to it and so forth, you kind of have to canvas a larger terrain in order to answer a specific region's question properly. So that's what we're going to do now, and I think the first part, it's like four. I'm going to do like a Mah'zute, a Daryu, an other, and a Fumasta. That's kind of my spirit's game to me to answer this question. So this will be the Mah'zute portion, but there will be three more coming up, so look forward to those. In these four filmings I'm going to do here real quick, there's a general issue of spirit forms, of what exactly is going on there a bit, and particularly to answer Alir's question later on, is about being possessed, being train wrecked, being stuck in a rut, different things of that nature, sort of tumbled over, entangled, whatever, at these different stages. So that's what we're going to do now, and I'm going to start with being entangled with the Mah'zute, being possessed by the Mah'zute. So this lines up very nicely with misreads. Misreads and Mah'zute, that's like the beginning. But as we'll see later on, they are connected to the others. For example, when you start trying to explain people their misread, you may get some fierce pushback, which is actually not going to be Mah'zute confusion. That's what I said, that there's more than one factor going on. There's going to be Daryu, rage, fear, doubt, things of that nature. And so when that's going on, that will affect the relationship to the Mah'zute misreads, and also the other relationships, the other relationship to Fumasta. So each of the spirit forms, how you're doing with that one will affect the other spirit forms that you interact with. So let's go high level here right now for the Mah'zute possessions. You basically have Xi and V, which are the modulation powers, and they have some elements to them that would be modulation, obviously, but the world may ask for. Being adaptive, being objective, being logical, being literal. All these things are coming out of the ideal comfort zone of the Naiji. So it's important to note that each of those powers, the Xi and the V, they have several facets to them. So for example, let's take Xi. With Xi, there is the element of being adaptive, subjective, and logic-based. Since we're Naiji, the fact that Xi is subjective is not really so much an issue here, because that would just reinforce that we're subjective. But the two that do come up are the adaptive and the logic-based. And Xi can actually strongly affect the momentum side with all of those, or just certain ways of modulating, very emphasized. And that's important to note because that will come into the kinds of misreads. For example, when you talk Naiji, as far as Naiji that misread as Naiji, usually they are bringing in the Xi of logic, of cold, reasoning. But they're not bringing in necessarily as much, although they do, which brings over modulation, but they're not bringing in enough of the adaptive element of Xi to rein themselves in enough where they think that they are adaptive. So if you're a Naiji that thinks you're Naiji, that is Xi, too much Xi, but particularly the part about being logical and cold. There are other Naiji that are frequently misreading as Jaini. Where does this come from? Xi, also the Xi. And because Xi sometimes it can really overmodulate the momentum, not so much on the logic, but on restraint. Don't easy. Be a little more cool, man. Don't be so fired up. Don't be so aggressive. Don't be so intense, so wound up. So Xi can really emphasize that aspect of controlling how much you go forward, how much you present yourself, how much you engage the environment. Xi's easy there. So when that happens, the person may still think that they're values-based, but the Zai is actually going to make them they're adaptive, because we'll be doing Ji, but very deferential Ji. That Zai overmodulation, that variety of it will cause Ji to be in deferential mode almost all the time. So when Ji is active, but always in deferential mode, then the Naiji will probably think they're values-based, but they'll think they're adaptive. And then if you have someone, for example, that's Ji thinks they're a Zaini, that's going to be likely, again, the Zai, but taken even further to where it has both those elements. It has the elements of adaptability, overmodulation, and logic overmodulation. So they've gone past, Nai-Zi or Zai-Ni, and they're over in Zai-Ni. Okay. These aren't exact relationships because, well, they are and they aren't. It's just there's so many factors going on that there's not always a direct correlation here. But you will see a very definite pattern of when someone who's a Nai-Ji who misreads as a Zai-Ni or a Zai-Ni or a Nai-Zi, those factors I told you about will come into play a majority of the time. Up here, we have V. V has literal and adaptive, and it also has objectives. So V'd up Nai-Ji can often think that they are Ni alpha. It is not uncommon. So this gets to the point again where they still think they're an interpretive. So the V overmodulation has not been so much the literal aspect of V, more of it is the amped, the really being on, the objective drinking in quality. So that quality of the V makes them think that they are an objective receiver, although they still see patterns. Whereas, and this gets now, see, we're kind of constellating here, this gets a bit to Lyra's question, which will come up in the Daryu section, which is there are Nai-Ji who are V'd up, but they don't think they're objective, and they don't think that they are adaptive at all. They think they're most often Vai-Ji, and sometimes if they're also Za'd up, they think they're Vai-Zi. And these Nai-Ji who think they're Vi alpha, they can be very, very difficult to deal with. They can be real hard asses on themselves and others in inappropriate ways, because they're trying to almost be a Vai-Ji, but even a Vai-Ji wouldn't actually be like these Nai-Ji are being. So for example, myself, I have relatives I'm estranged from them. I'm estranged from all my relatives at this point. But one of them is a Nai-Ji that thinks that they're a Vai-Ji, and there's one that's a Nai-Ji who thinks that he is a Vai-Zi. And in both these cases, there is an association with the use of the V as far as, I guess, abilities, worldly abilities. So that way of actually overmodulating with V, it can also come out in the gluttonous way and so forth, and that more like addictive, overindulging quality that V overmodulation brings. But there can be also like a person who is very directed. They see themselves as a hunter, but they're V'd up insofar as they're hyper concerned with the details. Whenever they do momentum, they never do momentum without thinking, how is that going to land on details? So you can actually have a V'd up Nai-Ji who's highly directive, and also one who is more adaptive or thinks are objective. We talked mainly about the modulation over here, but you can also be possessed by a tandem power. And Nai-Ji run this a lot because Ji has a lot of very intense emotive connections, feelings of guilt, feelings of duty, honor, code of conduct. And so that can really weigh on a Nai-Ji. And so it's not uncommon for Nai-Ji to think that they're objective because of the Ji that pulls on them. They feel it pull so strongly, and they are able to shapeshift and do Ji things to help Ji things get better, even though it's maybe too taxing for them to do it that much in such an objective way. But they are able to do it. They can, summon themselves to do it, and they'll often think that they are Ji-Nai or something of the like. And this is something that confuses a lot of people too, is in pod layer, we're teaching you how to read everything, existence. So the pod layer theory teaches how to read on every level, and even levels we haven't thought of yet. There's pathways for stuff we haven't thought of yet. So that we get there, we're like, okay, cool, upgrade. Don't stick with the old way of looking at things. Take the new way. This is important to note because we'll be working with Typology Town right now. I have my team going out there and handling that. There'll be other missions that we do as well. And on different missions, particularly in the beginning phases of Podlayer's public rollout, there will be a focus on mojo reading and confirming that phenomenon. But that's just the beginning. That opens up the door to all the other pathways of Podlayer. Because once that first phenomenon is proven true, it also shows that it's like the beginning gear of a much larger clockworks. This gets into misreading because there are Naiji who think of themselves as being directive, subjective, perception lead, values-based, interpretive. They see themselves in that way in a very crude level because they don't actually know what that means. They would identify with those energy fields, but they don't actually know what those energy fields really imply. They also don't know whether or not they're rare or not. A lot of them think that they're rare when they're not. There's the issue of being able to connect with their other. There are many Naiji experts out there. We'll be getting those as well. Demas is going to have a lot of fun. Who have misread their own clients, have misread their own spouses. So, but they got their own dichotomies right. They got their own dichotomies right, but they did not get the dichotomies or much else right with people that were their clients or related to them or public figures, celebrities, so on and so forth. So there is all kinds of reading because a person can get their dichotomies right, but they may not be able to read their people pool around them correctly, or know what peak pathways means, or so on and so forth. So we have a lot of work to do there because you could, for example, know what your energy fields are, but still be in deep denial as to what your Naiji true nature is, and what is the true nature of the story of the human species and its relation to the rest of existence. So just because you've got those dichotomies right doesn't mean you've got the greater vastness of math correct, because there's a lot more than mojo kids. And then, of course, this is just typology focus right now because it's fairly easy to correct their work. But everyone is attempting to read themselves. They're attempting to read themselves, the bubble around them, and the greater bubble as far as they understand it through whatever means they use, media, and so forth. Now, when they're doing this, they are making a statement as to what is their essence, and what is the essences of other people, and what is the essence of those essences working together on Earth, and so forth. Well, people who believe in qualia, or not in qualia, the philosophical concept of actually having an innate Tao, a way to a human. Some people believe in that, some people don't. Well, anyone who doesn't believe that has misread. They didn't even get any of the dichotomies. Then there are people who aren't doing any kind of typological statements, but they're making statements on genders are like this, and people from Africa are like this, and other shit that actually our math also informs on that. So people who do typology and get their dichotomies wrong, we'll correct that. People who got their dichotomies right, we still have a lot to correct. People who aren't doing typology or cognitive configuration at all, they're still making statements about what existence is and about how humans are that directly relate to the data we have that says that that's not so. So we'll be correcting a lot of misreads. All these misreads correlate to various strengths and variations of Mah'zute possession. So you can be possessed by thinking you're a Zaini when you're an Naiji. That's a kind of possession. You can be a Naiji that thinks that you are having those energy fields, but you actually think that hooking up with another Naiji is the way to go. Also incorrect, so you're possessed by that false storyline. You're playing a story that's not actually true. You're playing around a little fantasy world, thinking that's existence. If you are in a country that believes in views on men and women and other kinds of cultural things are just mathematically not true, natural law does not support those assertions, living a life based on those assertions is a big fat fucking farce. And big fat fucking farces leads to lots of Mah'zute possessions. So there's Mah'zute possessions all over the world on just a mass scale. But we have the tools to get it. It's called truth. And now we're going to tell people about the truth, and then they'll go, ah! And then we'll help them out. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's good work. It's very important work. And let's do it.